Hi, Jeanette. It's really a pleasure interviewing you for this oral history project. So welcome. You and I have known each other for such a long time. I don't even
Yes,
know
yes.
when
I don't
I
remember
first
either.
knew you, but I've always admired you for being a real pioneer in the planning profession at APA. So
Well, thank
I
you.
feel honored to be able to interview you.
Oh,
So
thank
before
you.
we start, I'd like to do a brief introduction, and then we'll dive into some questions that hopefully will cover, your roots as going into the planning profession, kind of personally what you're all about, and then we'll cover some of your many accomplishments during your long career.
Thank
So I have the pleasure sitting with Jeanette Dinwiddie-Moore, FAICP, who's the principal of Dinwiddie and Associates. She has over 50 years of planning experience ranging from housing, general plan, and zoning updates, base reuse, transportation studies, and infrastructure. So a jack of all trades. For over 30 years, she has served as a consultant to PG&E, providing assistance with land use planning issues, permit entitlements, and environmental assessments. Jeanette has served as the marketing director, membership inclusion director, and vice president for administration for the California chapter of the American Planning Associates. So she has a long history of involvement in APA. She was also the APA Region's 6th director and is active with a number of APA and AICP communities and divisions and California planning. I'd like to acknowledge she's received many awards. Some of the recent awards was in 2017. She received the Planning Advocate Award from APA California, a much deserved award. And more recently in 2022, she received the AICP President's Award from the national chapter. So with that, I'd like to kind of dive into some questions for Jeanette. And thinking back on your early days, like I've said, you've had a long, distinguished career. And Jeanette, can you reflect on those early years? What drew you to planning? I know many of us have different paths that we took to get to planning. And what key experiences or opportunities influenced you to choose this profession?
Well, I have to be honest. I was not planning to be a planner. I was actually planning to be either an economist or a teacher. But I was working in the Model Cities program in Watts in the LA area. And so I was doing work trying to help revitalize Watts, and specifically in terms of housing and community development. And I felt I needed to learn a little bit about it. And there was a conference on planning that year, and I went. And I met Dr. Robert Catlin at that conference, and he enticed me to pursue a master's in planning. So I kind of stumbled into the profession, and actually I'm very happy I did. I feel it's a very good fit for me. And it aligns with a lot of my interests and things that I'm interested in doing, which has to do with like trying to improve environments, trying to improve communities, trying to provide more equity, and making sure there's parity in what's going on. So that's how I got into planning, and I've stayed in it all these years.
Yeah. I know in talking to others have a similar history of you. Originally, you were involved in some tangential, and then you've discovered planning, and then you develop a passion for planning.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. And as you mentioned, you've done a lot of work in the area of diversity and inclusion, and you're widely recognized for your tireless advocacy of these issues in planning. Can you talk a little bit about the contributions that you've made at the national and state levels, and what you're most proud of?
Well, and in the 80s, it was very obvious when you looked at the demographics that even though, particularly in California, that the state was changing dramatically demographically. But when you looked at, and planning is something that deals a lot with neighborhoods and communities. And when you think about who we were representing in those neighborhoods and communities, they were not represented in the planning profession. Mm-hmm. So David Salazar, myself, Mitch Silver, some other folks, we were talking about it, and we were encouraged, by others in the profession like Steve Preston to think about maybe what can we do to improve that. And that's how we sort of drafted the Diversity and Equity Inclusion program that was actually adopted by the California chapter first. And so with that, then Mitch, being on the more national scale, helped to take it to a more national level, and we supported him through that whole effort. So that's how we got that going. And just, again, trying to get that equity and parity and make sure that, you can't plan for a community if you don't know anything about the community. And we need to have people from those communities involved in what we're doing. And so it was an opportunity to just try to change that narrative and make it more representative of who we were planning for, particularly in the areas where I was planning at the time, which were lower income areas. I was working in, like Watts is where I started my career. And then when I moved to the Bay Area, I was working in Richmond, which is another minority community in the Bay Area, and also working in some parts of Oakland. So the areas where I was working were predominantly minority areas. So I was like the only person looking like me doing this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that you've been a strong advocate for ensuring that the Planning Commission reflects the communities that we work, and that's a key way to build trust with the community.
Not only planning commissioners, but the professionals.
The professionals.
Because I think, I really believe that we benefit from having diverse perspectives. Mm-hmm. We all learn from one another. Mm-hmm. And so that collective collaboration just brings about, I think, a much better product, mm-hmm. much better understanding of what we're trying to achieve. And I think we have common goals. I think we all want to see things better in the communities that we work for. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't know what the best approach is to achieve that, or how to solicit that information from the residents to know what they really want to have. So by having different people who have that, have an ear maybe for that, what's being said, and can understand a little bit better what's underneath that, I think helps to get the engagement going, helps to get the communication going, helps to get the information that we need to make better plans.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's good to see, at least in California, our profession has gotten more diverse over the years. Yeah.
And I think the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program nationally at APA has
mm-hmm.
helped to make this. We have a code of ethics that talks about equity.
Yeah.
But we weren't really looking beyond how to include that. So I think on the national level, I think we've become more aware of the need to do that and have that type of parity across, all segments of our planning activities.
Yeah. And I give credit to you for pushing that conversation or that dialogue at both the national and state level. Both of us are members of the California Planning Roundtable. And I know you were very much involved in the membership committee to ensure the California Planning Roundtable, which is considered like for lack of a better word, a think tank for APA California. Can you talk about your work in making the California Roundtable, the membership, more diverse?
Yeah, when I came on the roundtable, there was very few people of color on the roundtable, and we were doing a lot. As you said, it's a think tank, and we're looking at what are the issues that are affecting California in the future, and how can we plan for those things. Well, one of the big things was the demographic change that was occurring very rapidly, mm-hmm. and so I'm happy that the roundtable recognized that they had a need to make some changes. Unfortunately, we're all human. We have a tendency to know people who we work with or have been around or associate with, and sometimes that limits us in having the diversity of perspectives. And so we set up like the matrix that would give us a better sense of where were our gaps in terms of not only in terms of diversity, of racial or of ethnic diversity, but also in terms of skill sets that we didn't have in the roundtable. And that matrix has become like a guiding principle for the roundtable now. And whenever we get ready to look at who we need, it's diversity in geography, mm-hmm. it's diversity in gender, it's diversity in race and ethnics, mm-hmm. But it's diversity in specializations because our profession has become so specialized too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of areas of expertise that none of us possess, and it's important to have that there too as we plan and look for what the future of California should be like.
Yeah, I know the efforts on creating more diverse membership has been a lot more deliberative in the recent years. Well, I'd like to kind of shift gears a little bit and really start talking about personal reflections about your career. One of the things I do know about you is that you have a passion for planning. And I wanted to ask you, what core beliefs or values really motivated you in the profession and guided your planning career? And then the second part of the question, and what about life in general beyond planning? What defines you? What do you think defines you, both in your career and in your life?
In my in my career and in my life, what defines me? I always have had the values of trying to do good for others. And I think that's what made planning so attractive to me, because when I wanted to be a teacher, so that I could help young people achieve their highest potential. And in planning, it gives us an opportunity to help a community achieve its highest potential and hopefully retain that community's character as we do that. And so that's my values, and I carry that in everything that I do. I mean, equity, serving people who are underserved, which is core in our code. Trying to make the world better, the environment, being concerned about the environment, so that when what we have now is passed on in hopefully a better way to those who to come after us. So those are some of those core values, and those are just like guiding principles in planning. And in terms of things that I'm most proud of that I've had a chance to do. Early on, I was in housing a lot, did a lot of housing work. One of the things that I can see, because a lot of times we do a lot of planning, we have these wonderful concepts, wonderful ideas that you get put in a beautiful planning document, and it never gets implemented. And I love the times when I've had a chance to see something come to fruition. I'm lucky enough to have worked on housing development projects for my church, and there's their first senior housing projects, and I go over there all the time, and there's like 100 units of senior housing that is serving that community and helping people who are in need, to have good shelter. When I worked on the project for San Francisco Executive Park many years ago, it provided a pathway for some of the residents in the Bayview, Hunters Point, and Visitation Valley neighborhoods to get jobs, not only with the developer, but also with other entities that were coming in tenants into that complex. So that was like another public benefit program. It's one of the early community benefit type of agreements that was taken on by a private developer, which was sort of unusual in those days. I'm trying to think of other things that I've done, but those are just two of the highlights that I can think of. And then the other thing is when I sit back today, I don't think I need to be doing a lot, because today our profession is a lot more aware, and it has changed in what it looks like in terms of the membership that it has. I mean, one of the things on the roundtable we now have to talk about often is like, it was predominantly a male organization when I got in there, and now today it's a lot of women. So we need to shift back and make sure we got that good balance, So it has shifted. Things have shifted in a lot of ways over the years that I've been planning, so it's good. Some of the things with PBCD, Planning the Black Community Division, that I've had, like trying to help us as, we're trying to get, like for FAICP, our fellows, trying to get more fellows of colors, because there's over 600 fellows. But fellows of colors represent less than 10% of the good. So we need to increase that, because there's people who are out there who have done great things, and they need to be honored. So my role, I feel now, is to find those folks and help get them honored for what they have done, because their insights and ideas on planning are way beyond what I would have ever imagined when I was coming through.
Yeah. And I know a theme that I know of you. You're very supportive, and I mean, I hear often people talk about you in that manner, a very supportive person. You've mentored a lot of planners in your career. Talk about how the importance of mentoring that you see, because that's something you're known for, and you spend a lot of energy in that. And that, to me, that's one of your really strong contributions to APA. But if there's other items that you're very proud of in your association with APA, it'd be
Well, mentoring is important. I mean, because none of us get where we are without some help. And whenever someone comes to me and they ask if I can help them, I try, to do the best I can. And it's a joy to see that talent blossom and go to a level that's way beyond what I would have ever thought I'd have personally tried to achieve, And so I've mentored people across the country for years. And I don't know, it's just a joy. It's been a joy to be able to do that,
yeah.
And some of them have achieved some very high positions, and that's really gratifying to think that I might have had just a little ounce of something that contributed to them getting to where they are today,
Yeah. And I think that the awards that you've received really recognizes that contribution. The AICP President's Award. I remember sitting through the presentation, and they kind of talked about your background and your mentorship and your contributions to APA was a strong factor in the recognition.
Well, when I was started being active in an APA, didn't have, there weren't a lot of women and there weren't a lot of people of color, and even like with the Planning Accreditation Board, there wasn't a lot of site visitors who were women or people of color. Today, that has changed quite a bit, on a lot of the boards and commissions, the appointments that were coming up, there wasn't that representative, So now, like I said, it's so enjoyable to see that change and see people being cognizant and conscientious about trying to make sure that we have everyone at the table so that we can be the best organization that we can, and we can do the best planning work that we can. And we don't forget our commitment that we are all about trying to make communities better, making people's lives better.
Yeah.
And that means everybody in that community and in that environment.
Yeah, no, that's true. I totally agree. And talking about the planning profession, let's talk a little bit more about that. And this is kind of a tougher question. It's kind of like looking at both sides of the profession and being reflective. And when we think about the accomplishments of the planning profession, some things we've done extremely well. So I'd like to get your take on what you see as far as what the Planning Commission has achieved, planning profession has achieved. And then on the flip side, we know that the history of planning also has unintended consequences.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that. And as far as the unintended consequences, what remedies do you think in looking at the future of how can we address those consequences?
Well, I don't know if I have answers for how to address those, because those are some big questions. But I think that solving any problem, the first step is acknowledging that there's a problem. And yes, we as planners have made mistakes, and we will make mistakes in the future because things are changing and evolving. I mean, we can look back over times when we've gone in to try to help neighborhoods become more stable, more vibrant and healthier. But it's been sometimes at the expense of the residents who were actually planning for, and they were just priced out and gentrified. But I think today we're a lot more aware of that, and we're trying to put some more protections in place so that doesn't occur as often. Also, in terms of environmental impacts, I think we're a lot more aware of impacts that we've created over the years, where roads with pollution and that has had adverse health effects on communities for years, particularly lower income communities, where we put facilities that nobody wants. We're being placed in those communities. So now we're understanding that more. So we're trying to make amends for that, trying to correct some of those type of situations and changing it. So it starts with a recognition that we made a mistake. Then it looks at how can we solve that and what can we do to mitigate what we've already done. And I think in terms of keeping that perspective ever present in what we're doing is important. And so as long as we're cognizant of trying to assess the good something can do, but also what are the potential negative impacts that could occur that we hadn't thought about before, and talk to people to get their sense of what they feel would be good and what would not be good and why, and trying to make that balance. I think that will help us achieve much better results in the future, in planning. And I have to say myself, I've worked on some projects that when I look back now, I'm happy about some of the things that they did, but in some of the hopes that we had for what they would have achieved, they didn't realize all of those, And I look at them and see what I could have done better. I don't know exactly, because at that time we thought we were doing something that was cutting edge.
Yeah.
And the edge cut some in ways that we didn't plan it to cut,
Yeah.
And so as part of the learning process, we take that as a hit and use that information so the next time we do something, hopefully we'll not make that mistake again.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And when I look back at my career, some of the things we were taught about zoning and the things that we were considered, this
non-desirable
it was only more recently we've recognized the unintended consequences of zoning, the economic impacts and the racial impact of zoning.
Exactly.
So, looking at California, you have been working for PG&E. You worked in a lot of different communities, and you kind of alluded to this too in your previous comments. But what have you seen are the differences in the communities that you worked in? Are there certain things that you mentioned? Some things that you wish could have been done better? Is it kind of community specific, or is it kind of statewide?
I think it's going to be both. I mean, I think we've learned that unless we put protections in when we're doing housing projects and housing development, and when we're doing particularly revitalization projects and bringing in new uses into a community, unless we have some way of trying to stabilize that community so that it doesn't shift and gentrify. I think we've learned that as a lesson. So we're trying. We don't have the solutions worked out yet, but we have awareness of things we can try to put in, like covenants or to hold fast to who was there before. Ways of helping them people who are there to be able to stabilize whatever they had so they don't lose it as it goes up. Helping to educate people so they understand it. So that's sort of statewide. In communities, I think because I've had that opportunity to work across the state on some of the projects I'm on, I've come to appreciate a lot better, having been raised as an inner city girl and a city girl and not being out in the rural areas, but coming to understand appreciation of a lot of the issues that are being encountered by rural areas that we don't think about a lot, and particularly in farming communities and wilderness type of communities and very remote areas where they don't have access to the internet or a lot of services that we just take for granted, And then, one of the other consequences that I think I've come to realize too is as we do displacement in urban areas, we also force people who were in the urban areas because they needed the services that were there in the urban areas. And when we force them out into this suburban areas that has no support systems out there because they weren't anticipating servicing those individuals, then we just create bigger problems for those communities because now they have to gear up to do that. And the time between when they can come to get those services in place and those people's needs, those needs get kind of exasperated. So, I don't know. It's a little bit frustrating on that side, but those are things that I've had a chance to observe. But I think we're getting a lot better and more aware of how to do better. I mean, I'm trying to think of some specifics that I've seen, but I can't think of it right now.
That's fine. Well, your perspective about the rural communities is really interesting, and I know that we tend to focus as planners because most of us work in more urbanized areas, but it's really true. Rural communities have the unique sort of planning challenges, and to talk about your discussion about households need to move out to more rural areas where the services are less available, and economically they may be more challenged too, which is the reason why some people need to move out to the more outlying areas. It creates a more challenge as far as services, also transportation.
Transportation's not there, social services are not there. The infrastructure for medical facilities aren't there. And so when a person has an emergency or has a crisis, the support systems for those aren't in place for them, and so the probability of having it resolved is less. The probability of becoming more severe is greater, and the impacts on the community become more draining because they're not able to handle that, and they never anticipated taking on these type of burdens, and the time it takes for a community to grow up and to put those infrastructures in place takes years. I mean, we're talking decades before you can probably have, and by that time, the population has grown, the needs have grown, and you're still trying to chase to get up to par with what you need,
And employment opportunities are trailing too. So,
Exactly.
So you have folks that are commuting, into urban areas to work, and the over a 1 hour commute.
Or underemployed.
Underemployed.
Because they can't even afford to commute.
Right.
They can't even afford to commute.
That's true.
So there's a lot of social. I think one of the things that planners have to take into account that when we were trained, I don't know, like when I was trained, we didn't have to deal with all this. We didn't look at the health issues and all the social issues at that time, and the allied services that we needed to really make sure we were incorporated. Some of them we did. We look at public facilities and stuff like that. But today, I think as a planner, we have to be aware that it's not just the land use that we're trying to plan for, or the population. There are other things that are aligned with that land use and that population that have to be taken into consideration if we really want to really have balanced and healthy communities. And we have to be honest with ourselves that we have to bring in allied professions because we don't have that expertise, and we don't understand those issues.
I think when I was starting on the planning profession, the focus was on land use, physical planning.
Exactly.
And I think the profession got a lot more sophisticated now, and we understand the interconnections between social issues, cultural issues, economic issues. They're all part of the picture. So now the planning profession has gotten more complex.
Very much so.
Because it is a complex issue. It's just not about land use planning, And what we do land use wise impacts social, and what happens at a social level impacts land use.
And I think that we have a key role we play in this because I think we understand these are the multiple issues that are there. So it makes us like a conductor of a symphony. Where we have a lot of pieces and a lot of different instruments, but they all have an important part to make that music sound right. And if we learn how to bring that together, we can have a beautiful symphony. Otherwise, we're going to have an awful sounding mess,
I love that analogy, the symphony, us being the conductors, But a lot of times we can't control a lot of it versus a conductor. But, hey, I like that analogy. Well, I like to kind of shift to talking about the next generation of planners. You've been professional a long time, so have you. And so have I. One of the areas that is always interesting in an interview, and what younger planners always ask is, wanting to hear how seasoned planners reflect on things they have learned along the way, and asking, well, what advice do you have for the upcoming generation of planners, and what do you know now that you wish you knew back in your early days? So when talking, if you were to address planning students or just young planners, what would your advice or your observations be?
Well, I think that my advice would be that you need to be more aware of everything that's happening around you. We can't be just solo. Like when we came through, you learned land use, and you went in land use, or you went into housing, and you did housing. Those silos won't exist that well anymore. There'll still be the specialties, and that's good. But I think it's good for a planner to have a broad overview and understanding of how all these pieces fit together. So if I was a young planner coming out now, I try to learn as much about all of the entities that I can, so that I have some perspective of how it all works together. Because as I was saying, that conductor is going to be the one who's going to stand out and have greater advancement, because they're more flexible in the things that they can do. They're not just pigeonholed into one type of thing. And I think our profession is going to evolve quite a bit, because it's just the nature of what's happening in our world. I mean, planning used to be more localized, but the impacts are becoming more regional. And regional impacts are becoming more involved with the state impacts. So there's a lot of interconnections that have to occur. So it's no longer just knowing just what's happening in your little jurisdiction. You have to go beyond that.
Yeah.
So having a broader perspective of what's going on in your community, your broader community and around you, is going to be helpful to you. And also being aware of opportunities that aren't only in the United States, but internationally, because there's a lot of places in the world where our skills are valued and can be utilized, and you can make a difference. So it's a broader profession in some ways, in a lot of ways, I think, than it was like when I first started off, and you did housing planning,
Yeah.
or you did land use planning, or base reuse studies, or you did transportation only. And I don't think we're going to be in that environment too much longer.
Yeah.
Even when you're doing like secret documents, you used to have people who just specialize in one area. I think now the person who's going to be the most attractive is the person who understands the whole implications of the whole secret document and what it means.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage people to try to have a broader perspective on all the other elements of planning, so they have a more comprehensive view and can speak. They don't have to be an expert, but at least have some knowledge of it.
Yeah.
And then know who to go to and those specializations that you can talk to when you need to know some more about it, so that you can bring that to the assessment of a problem that's before you.
Yeah. So even though planning has become, I think, more specialized, it's your point, which I totally agree, is still important to really know a little bit about all the different elements that play into that specialty to be a good planner.
Yeah, if you want a comprehensive plan,
Yeah.
you have to have all those elements. And if you want to be the one who's leading that, you have to understand all those elements.
Yeah.
So.
That's really good advice. So we're at the conclusion of the interview. So I want to thank you, Jeanette. But I wanted to, as a wrap up, are there some closing comments or thoughts that you might have in mind as kind of parting comments for this interview?
My point comes, I think that, in the over 50 years I've been doing planning, it doesn't seem like it's that long, but it has been.
Fast,
It's been really, really fast, and the different experiences that I've had. I still like planning. Sometimes I don't like what we do and what we have to do or some of the details of it, but I think it's still a very rewarding profession. And, I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to stumble into it.
Yeah.
And it's served me very well.
Yeah.
And I see that it's something that our world really needs.
Yeah,
You know, a person who can figure out how to go from A to Z and all the points in between is a very unusual person. And that's what most of us planners can do.
Yeah.
And how to bring the other parties together. That's what most of us do every day. And so I think we need to be very proud of the skills that we have
Yeah.
and utilize them for our advantage in the future.
Yeah. Well, the profession has been richer with your contribution, I have to sincerely say. So, Jeanette, thank you very much for agreeing to this conversation.
Thank you.